What's up, everyone? My name is Pastor Brandon, and I'm so happy you're joining us today. If it's your first time with us, I certainly hope it's not your last time with us, because here at New Post Church, we lead people to love God, love people, and to make a difference. We do that by creating a church that is for the Fredericksburg region. We support local schools, women's centers, homeless shelters, and food banks to make a difference in our community. Now, let's jump into this week's message. So today we are wrapping up our series on living your best life, where we've talked about multiple different things that we should probably do, that we've learned from the stories of Daniel, that it comes to living our best life, and how we need to make sure culture is not defining us. We need to make sure that we live a life of humility, not a life of pride and arrogance, that we make sure that we just are doing the right things and living according to what God has called us to, not according to what the world around us wants us to live. Now, today we're wrapping this up in a very important installation of it. This is probably a significant one when it comes to your relationship with God. And this is like the icing on the cake if you're going to truly be living your best life. And that's what I want for you. That's what our church wants for you. We want you to be living your best life all around. So as we wrap up this series here, we've kind of walked through the life of Daniel too. Like, we've gone in chronological order and seen the way he's kind of handled things, the way life has gone for him. At this point in the story, in chapter 6, Daniel, he's well into his 70s. And as we learned last week, the Babylonian Empire fell to the Persians. And now it's no longer King Nebuchadnezzar. He died years ago. It's not Belshazzar anymore, but it is now King Darius of the Persians. Now, if you've noticed, our boy Danny, he has been through some things in his life at this point. I mean, he's come and he's seen leaders come and leaders go. He's seen kingdoms come and kingdoms go. He has seen the way the world works. And Daniel understands that, hey, nothing is permanent. The only thing that is eternal is God. And again, Darius recognizes his capabilities. So the king places him as an administrator in the kingdom. And Daniel is, again, a big deal, lots of influence because of the work that he had done before. In fact, the text tells us Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom, meaning he was going to be basically his advisor or his leader for the entire kingdom. While the king just did kingly things, he would take care of actually running and administering the nation. Now, that caused all sorts of problems for the Persians, because not only you have a Babylonian Jew who is now going to take over the parts of the Persian Empire. That cannot happen. King Darius, we don't know what you're thinking, but that most certainly cannot happen. It made a couple of the leaders angry. They're frustrated. They don't understand what is going on. So at the moment that this happened, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds to charge Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Daniel was doing all the right things. He wasn't prideful, he wasn't arrogant, he wasn't cutting corners. He was doing the right things even when nobody was looking, so that when people were looking, they could not wrap him up. They weren't going to get Daniel in the traditional manner. So they put together a plan to figure out how they would wrap Daniel up. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man unless it has something to do with the law of his God." He's pretty devout to that Yahweh character. if we can figure out a way to wrap him up because he's following Yahweh and worshiping God, then we can handle it. So we need to figure that out. Now imagine the life of integrity that Daniel had. I mean, wouldn't you want people to say that about you? I mean, I know I certainly would. I would want people to say, no, there is no way that Brandon's going to do that. Like, we're not going to catch him in any type of corruption, lie, or anything. He's not negligent. He's good. He's honorable. He does the right thing. Like, that's my goal. I want to live that life to where when I get to be Daniel and somebody tries to accuse you of something, they don't even have any basis anywhere near you to stand on. They have to find something that's not solid. They have to persecute you because of your religion or because of the way that you take care of and care for your family. Like, they got to find something that's just not very stable. Imagine that life of integrity. He just had it together. The royals, administrators, the prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king, so they approached the king. Let's get the king involved. We'll figure this out. They've all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into a lion's den. Hey, king, you know what? You're so amazing. You've got so much together. You've got it all figured out. You're such a great human. I think we should just have a 30-day celebration for you. And for the next 30 days, everybody needs to give up worshiping their gods. Everybody needs to give up worshiping, other people or other like government, like everything. Just give up worshiping everything. And you know what, king? It should all be geared towards you, right? And you can imagine the king, how he feels about that. And they figured that they would say, okay, well, you know what? We need to issue a decree, and we need to make sure we elevate this, not just as a decree, but we need to elevate this to a position of a law, according to the Medes and the Persians. If we can elevate this to a position of the law, according to the Medes and Persians, we're good. I mean, if we can elevate it, we're solid, because then it can't be changed in writing. Once it's in writing like that, king, it can't be changed. We should go ahead and put this in there because you deserve it. You're such a great king. That everybody should do this, and let's put it in writing so that it can't be changed and there's no exemptions. All this to try to kind of weave together a narrative or weave together some things to completely destroy Daniel. That's what they want to do. They want to destroy Daniel, and because he had something that they wanted: power. And this is a side conversation, just a second. I'm just going to let you know this. If you're in a position of influence and power in your company, in your business, anywhere, somebody is probably going to try to take that from you in unhealthy means. So you should just live your life above reproach because of that. Not the only reason, but just on that alone. If you don't believe in God and morality and all that other stuff, if you're in a position of power, people are going to be gunning for that position. It's just going to happen, okay? You should live a life that they cannot accuse you of that in that way. Now, the king sits back and goes, you know what? I am pretty good. I'm a pretty good dude. I know what I'm doing. I mean, look at this kingdom. This is a great kingdom. We've done great things here, guys. I mean, come on. We conquered the Babylonians. We've conquered tons of other groups of people. We're about to unite. Start on the Greek world. I mean, come on. We've got this. This is great. You know what? That's a great idea, guys. Let's go ahead and do 30 days of it. And then they go, well, hold on, let's put it in writing. And he goes, do we need to put it in writing? And they're like, come on, you don't want anybody to change it. And he goes, you know what? You're right, I don't want anybody to change it, and I obviously deserve it. So for the next 30 days, everybody worships me, and then after that, you can go back to worshiping your petty gods. Now Daniel, when Daniel had learned that the decree had been published, it had been put in writing, it was like no exemptions anymore. He went home to his room upstairs where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. And then 3 times a day, he got down to his knees and worshiped Darius. Nope, that's not what it says. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed to Darius. No. He got down 3 times a day and renounced God in effort to glorify the king. No. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and he prayed. And he gave thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Notice it doesn't say he threw up his hands and gave up worshiping God for 30 days. He didn't become angry and went on a warpath for the careers of these men, which is what we would do in today's society. He didn't whine and become so upset that he's not getting his way. He just went home. And listen, this is important. He prayed anyway. He prayed anyway. Sometimes you need to, sometimes I need to, sometimes we need to just pray anyway. Don't shy away from your faith because of what you believe someone will think about you. Don't shy away from your faith because of what you think culture will label you as. Don't shy away from your faith because of the situation in the office or the situation in your family or whatever. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to make it seem like you're ashamed of your faith. Now, this is much more dire than what we experience on a day-to-day. I mean, he could be put to death for worshiping, but instead he says, no, I'm going to get down and pray anyway. And listen, you should pray anyway. If you feel, pray anyway. Pray over your meals in public. Don't be weird. Don't be the person babbling on the street corner like the pagans and the Pharisees. That's what Jesus says. Don't be like the pagans. Don't do that. But don't not give God glory because people are watching. That doesn't seem right. And sometimes it's an excellent way to bring people along with you, to show them that you can worship God and be normal. That's part of the biggest issue that I face when I see people. They think like, oh, you're a church person. And they immediately have a preconceived notion about people who go to church. They think of us as a bunch of blubbering weirdos, and to be honest, that's how the mainstream media portrays us. That we are, first of all, we support Donald Trump, and then we absolutely 100% believe that we can go and, spray water on people and they become healed, right? I mean, that's how the mainstream media portrays us because there are people in churches that go out there and act that way. But you're not that way, and I'm not that way. But they're never going to see it unless we pray anyway, unless we do it anyway. Now, we don't make it weird. We honor people around us. We do that type of stuff, but we most certainly do not shy away from our faith because culture will be offended by it. I mean, they're not stopping anything. Culture's not stopping what they're believing because of us. Why would we do it because of them? It's a great thing about America. You can do whatever you want. You can worship whoever you want. You can act however you want, behave however you want. As long as it don't hurt and kill other people, you're fine. So don't shy away from your faith and because of your belief in God, because you're afraid of how they're going to perceive you or the way that they're going to behave. Now, I understand that's a lot more difficult to say than it is to do. And I understand. I'm the guy that doesn't like to do that stuff in public at all. But sometimes you should just pray anyway. I should just pray anyway. So, here we go. Listen to what happens. So Daniel gets down, he prays anyway. Then these men went as a group and they found Daniel because they were looking for him. They wanted to catch him up. And sure enough, here he is getting down and praying yet again. And went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. And then they do what they were planning to do from the beginning. Everything fell together exactly how they wanted. And they go to the king. So they went to the king and they spoke to him about his royal decree. And they asked him, they say, did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? Then didn't you say that, king? And the king says, okay, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed and cannot be changed. Then they said, we got him. Okay, so then, king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, if you remember that place, pays no attention to you. Remember, you're going to put him second in command and he's going to kind of run things. He pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree that you put in writing. I mean, basically, your words mean nothing to him, your majesty. He still prays 3 times a day. And when the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. Not angry, distressed. And he was determined to rescue Daniel, and he made every effort until sundown to save Daniel. He'd put this in writing, so there's a situation where now the political figures have essentially trapped the king and trapped Daniel, where the king has got to kill Daniel because Daniel's violated the king's orders. And the king cannot be seen as somebody who doesn't enforce his orders, because that's just so important in those day and age. And this is important because the king did not want this to happen. First, because Danny was a great advisor. Like, he did lots of great things for him. We see that in the beginning of the beginning of the chapter. And now we see it that there might be some sort of friendship there. And what was amazing was Daniel's response. Daniel's response didn't change. We have no record in this book of him saying, hey, I'll stop. He doesn't make an excuse. He doesn't justify it. He doesn't violate his faith, and he's not ashamed of his faith. He just sits back and goes, you know what? I believe in God and I worship God, and I'm not going to stop doing that because you put out some sort of decree. Remember, Daniel, and you go, why would he do that? Because he's seen kingdoms come and he's seen kingdoms go. He has seen leaders come and he has seen leaders go. He's seen empires rise and he's seen empires fall. He's been part of them as it's happened. And he says, my devotion to God will not change. My situation is not going to change because I am devoted to the only eternal thing in this world. And his name is Yahweh, and that is who I am dedicated to. Daniel's devotion was unwavering. He was not going to quit. He was not going to stop serving or worshiping God because the king put something in order, or the king put something in writing. Now, I just want to challenge you for just a minute and just spend a second here. How many times have you compromised your faith because of people around you? How many times have you been afraid to witness to somebody? How many times have you not said that you were a Christian when somebody talked to you or asked you about your faith? How many times have you denounced it? Not aggressively, right? But you just have opted to not comment. How many times have you allowed culture to shift you? It's a question. It's not the whole point of the message, but it's just something we got to ask because Daniel was not willing to do that. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel in, and they threw him into the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, here we go. I didn't want to do this, Daniel, but here we are. May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. And a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not change. Meaning nobody could come in and rescue Daniel now, because the king had sealed the signet with the signet ring, which would have been suicide for anybody who went in there to try to save Daniel or move if anybody was going to be moving the rocks. And this is the point of no return. And Daniel held his devotion to the end. So Daniel, the stone gets rolled in front of the lion's den. Sun goes down. They leave Daniel all night long. The king can't sleep because he loves Daniel and he doesn't want him to die, but he knows he's probably getting eaten alive. But he knows he's heard about this God. And he says, maybe he'll save him. Maybe he'll save him. I don't know. So the king's rolling and tossing and turning all night. Can't figure this out. He's so frustrated. And at the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. And when he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice. Daniel, the king said, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? And Daniel answered, may the king live forever. He wants him to know, hey, look, I'm still here. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They did not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. Kind of a little dig, a little reminder, like, homie, I didn't do anything to you. You threw me in this. What's wrong with you? The king was overjoyed, and he gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him. And here in this next phrase, this is where we figure out the key to living our best life. Because he had trusted in his God. Daniel had trusted in his God. And again, this comes to the living boldly thing and stuff like that. And listen, there's going to be moments when it seems like things aren't going right. Daniel did nothing to deserve this, okay? He even says it in his little section. He says, look, I didn't do anything to you. I didn't do anything to these people. I didn't do anything wrong to God. I didn't do anything wrong at all. And you threw me in the lion's den, and now I'm about to be eaten by lions. I didn't do anything wrong, Your Majesty. And there's going to be times in your life when you don't do anything wrong. Life just punches you square in the face. Moments when you feel like you don't have an answer and you don't have anything to do. You're not sure what to do next. There's moments like when you get let go at the job. They let you go. You didn't do anything. It's just the way the economy worked and just the way things happened. You're going to have those moments where someone else got the promotion even though you know you deserved it. Your whole department knows you deserve it, but they got the promotion instead. I mean, there's going to be times where she left, and even after everything that you've been through, he left after everything that you gave him. There's going to be times like, Mom's not coming back from this one. This is the doctor report. The doctor report came back really, really bad. There's going to be those moments in your life. You've probably already hit a few. And if you haven't, they're coming. And it's in those moments, that your faith is built. It's in those moments that it's the hardest to live your best life. It's in those moments that it's the most difficult thing to do. And Daniel was in one of those moments. He's been cornered. He's done nothing wrong. He's going to be thrown into the lion's den. And it would be real easy for him to turn his back on God. It would be real easy for him to yell and scream at God. It'd be real easy for him to get frustrated with him. But he doesn't. He doesn't. Daniel trusts God. It was because of his worship of God. And he sat down and remembered this. And our response should mimic that. Because if we're going to live our best life, then it's going to happen when we begin to trust God. And now I know. You hear that and it seems so rudimentary and it seems insulting given the situation that you're in right now, that you would trust God with this outcome. But I encourage you, and all I can tell you is from my experience, you're not living your best life until you trust God. Because when you trust that God sees everything, He notices it all, and although you can't explain it and I can't explain it, it relieves a stress from you. It allows you to have a peace that, if we're going to use the apostles' words, transcends all understanding. And although you can't explain it, although you can't piece it together, although you can't even sit down with a piece of paper and quantify it, there's just a point, there's just a moment, a situation in which when you begin to trust, things begin to change. When you begin to trust, your perspective shifts. And you're not living your best life if you aren't trusting God. If you don't trust Him, then your life's going to be full of strife. Your life's going to be full of frustration. Your life's going to be full of, why God? Why did you do this? How could you do this? How dare you? Instead of, God, I know that you've got this figured out. I know you're going to take care of Mom. God, I know that you're going to take care of me and my family after I lost this job. God, I know you're going to take care of these things. I'm just going to trust you. I'm going to keep doing right things. I'm not going to stop, because Daniel didn't stop, right? Daniel didn't stop praying. He didn't stop worshiping. He didn't stop leading the nation, right? He just kept doing the right thing. And sometimes you and I just have to keep doing the right thing. and trust that God's going to do what only God can do. And sometimes it's going to look exactly how you want it to, and other times it's not. And it's in those moments that we trust that God is still going to do something amazing, that He's still going to figure this out, that these things happened for a reason, that He's sovereign and sees and knows and understands everything. I experienced this a little bit right before COVID, right before and during the COVID, when COVID started. So as you guys know, Pastor Brad at our church, he retired in December of 2019. So he decided December of 2019, I took over the church. Till that point, Brad was really, he was a phenomenal leader, and he was really kind of setting the, helping me set the culture, helped me understand on how to lead a smaller church, helped me figure out how to work the ins and outs of church. And because I'd only been out of the Marine Corps 2 years at that point. So he was like helping me make that transition, and he really kind of set the tone for us. And then when he retires, I'm all alone. And so I got to figure this out on my own. So I begin, I got Pastor Mike, I got Robert. So I'm leaning into those guys at New Life to learn some things and apply things. And then in March, COVID happens, and the entire church shuts down. Like the whole state of Virginia just shut down for a couple months, and we couldn't do anything, right? And we're arguing, making an argument that we should be allowed to, but the government's not hearing it. So we're just in this super, super strange and weird position. And here our church is small and only by maybe 60, 70 people at that time. Brad retires, we go into COVID, and then when we open back up in the summer of 2020, we have like 30 or 40 people there. And it's because of people being fearful of dealing with COVID, and we didn't know how that was going to play out yet. And then the other part too is like nobody's visiting churches at that point. Nobody's visiting churches. Nobody's going to church. If you don't know those people, you're not going to church. And then there's the whole situation of some of the families just left because Brad was their pastor, and I totally understand that and love them regardless of that. So this moment happened where in 2020 it opened up, and I just looked at God and I was like, look, my career's based on this. If this thing doesn't go, I don't know what I'm going to do because I gave up a job for the Secret Service. If this church fails, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. It doesn't look good right now. COVID, everybody's saying people aren't coming back. All the church experts are saying no, church will never be the same again. In-person church is going to go away. All these things that were being said and spun around in the world. And I remember just being so overwhelmed and so stressed out and so like, what am I going to do? How am I going to provide for my family? What if the church never comes back the way it did before? What are we going to do then? And I just remember I sat back and said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I've just got to trust God that He's going to provide for us the way He always has before. Now, it may not look exactly the same, but I have to know that God's going to do what God's going to do. And I have to trust Him that no matter what happens, He's going to work it out, and He's with me. If it falls apart, I'll have another career. If it falls apart, we'll find some God will make sure another church is available here in Virginia for people. Like if it falls apart, God's going to figure this out. And I just had to let go. And I'm sure we all did during this time in the pandemic. I had to let go. And I had to say, God, I fully trust you. I fully trust you. I fully trust you. And now look at the church. It's flourishing. It's doing amazing things. We're making a difference in the community. But 2 years ago, I was in that rut. I was tired. I was exhausted. And I looked around and not a lot of people were coming, which made me feel like we had key families leave at that time too. And I looked around and I thought, man, dude, maybe this ain't it. Maybe this ain't it. But then I remembered that God had called me here. I remembered the way everything happened. I remembered that God was moving before COVID, which means He's going to move during and after it. I just can't see it the way that I used to. So I resolved myself that I was going to trust God. And right about that time is when I began to live my best life, was when I decided that I'm not going to concern myself with things I can't control, that I'm not going to worry about things I can't control, that I am simply going to trust God. And that was when things became easier. The stress became less, and I just trusted him. And it was a Jesus take the wheel moment, right? And I mean, you maybe probably have these in your life too. Maybe you're going through one right now where you're weighing it and you're like, God, there's so many things I can't control. There's so many things I can't do. Just take a second, pray anyway, and trust him. Pray anyway and trust him. Do what Daniel did. Pray anyway and trust him. And you will begin to have the peace that transcends all understanding. The peace that doesn't make sense, the peace of mind that you shouldn't have, you're going to have when you finally let go of that stress and trust God. So, who do you trust? Trust yourself? Trust the people around you? Or do you trust your Heavenly Father? Do you trust that even though it doesn't make sense, he's still working in the background? That even though you don't have an exact answer for it, it's still coming together. Do you trust him that same way? So, let's pray. Father, thank you for these stories, these things that help us live our best life, God. We pray that you would help us figure out ways to trust you better, empower us to do that so that we could show people around you. Lord, we love you. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.